A man can conquer the world, bend markets to his will, and build an empire from nothing but code and caffeine, yet remain a stranger in his own home. For Arya Croft, the titan of Silicon Valley, returning to his Bel Air estate after a month-long battle in the corporate trenches of Asia, was meant to be a victory lap. He'd secured the largest tech merger of the decade. But the silence that greeted him wasn't peaceful, it was a vacuum. And in that void, he was about to discover a truth more shocking and transformative than any boardroom betrayal. A truth waiting for him by the shimmering, placid waters of his own swimming pool. The gates of the Croft estate slid open with a whisper, quiet, hydraulic hiss, a sound Arya usually found satisfying. It was the sound of security, of dominion. The sprawling driveway, lined with perfectly manicured Italian cypresses, wound its way toward a mansion that was less a home and more a monument to modern architecture. All glass, white stone, and sharp angles. It had been featured in magazines. It had won awards. And for the past 4 years, since his wife Isabella's passing, it had felt as cold and empty as a mausoleum. Arya stepped out of the back of his Maybach, shrugging off the lingering exhaustion of a 17-hour flight from Singapore. He'd done it. The Sterling-Kairos merger was his. It was a deal that would cement his legacy, a move so audacious his rivals were likely still reeling. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, the adrenaline of the win finally beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, gnawing need for familiarity, for home, for his daughter. Amelia. She was 18 now, on the cusp of womanhood. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been a whirlwind of frantic energy, cramming for final exams before her high school graduation. He'd missed the ceremony. The thought sent a familiar pang of guilt through him, one he quickly suppressed with logic. The merger was for her. This house, the fortune, the future, it was all for her. She had to understand that. "Mr. Croft, welcome home," said his driver, a stoic man named Peterson, as he retrieved the luggage. "Thank you, Peterson. Has everything been quiet?" Arya asked, his eyes scanning the imposing facade of the house. "As you'd expect, sir. Miss Amelia has been, well, she's been here." The slight hesitation in Peterson's voice was a flicker on Arya's radar, but he dismissed it. Amelia was a teenager. Teenagers were moody, enigmatic. It was their natural state. He pushed open the heavy 10-foot-tall glass door. "Amelia!" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous, white marble foyer. A massive, abstract sculpture, one of Isabella's last purchases, seemed to mock the silence. No answer. He walked through the living area, a space so large and sparsely furnished it felt more like an art gallery. He noted a few things out of place: a textbook on the obsidian coffee table, a half-empty glass of water leaving a faint ring. Signs of life, at least. He'd half expected the place to be hermetically sealed as usual. He continued through the house, his footsteps the only sound. He checked her bedroom. It was empty, the bed immaculately made. He checked the home theater, the library. Nothing. A knot of irritation began to form in his stomach. After a month away, after closing the deal of a lifetime, he expected his daughter to be there. He'd sent a text from the plane. She knew he was coming. It was then he heard it, a faint splash followed by a ripple of laughter. It came from the back of the house, from the pool. Arya's mood lifted slightly. Of course, it was a scorching August afternoon in Los Angeles. Where else would she be? He walked towards the floor-to-ceiling glass walls that overlooked the backyard. The view was breathtaking, an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the hazy panorama of the city below. And there, in the crystalline blue water, was Amelia. She was beautiful, a perfect blend of his features and her mother's grace. Her long, dark hair was slicked back, and she was laughing, a sound so pure and unrestrained, it felt alien in this house of hushed tones and formal etiquette. But she wasn't alone. With her in the pool was a woman, a black woman with her hair tied up in a colorful wrap, her shoulders strong, and her smile wide. Arya recognized her immediately, Serafina Washington, the head of his household staff, the maid. Arya stopped dead in his tracks, his hand frozen on the handle of the sliding glass door. He watched, unseen, as Amelia playfully splashed water at Serafina, who retaliated with a splash of her own. They were close, their bodies occupying the same relaxed, intimate space typically reserved for family or lifelong friends. Serafina said something, and Amelia threw her head back and laughed that beautiful, uninhibited laugh again. A cold, unfamiliar feeling coiled in Arya's gut. It was a complex venom of confusion, anger, and a possessiveness he hadn't realized he harbored. This wasn't right. Serafina was his employee. She was paid and paid very well to manage his home, to ensure his daughter was cared for, to maintain the strict boundary between staff and family. She was not paid to be a playmate. She was not paid to swim in his pool, laughing with his daughter as if she were her own. Every instinct in his body, honed by years of corporate strategy and ruthless negotiation, screamed that a line had been crossed. A sacred, unspoken rule had been violated. He wasn't a racist. He told himself this firmly. He had a diverse board, employed thousands of people from all backgrounds. This wasn't about race. It was about propriety. It was about a breach of professional conduct. It was about the woman he paid to clean his house acting like she owned the place. He watched for another 30 seconds, the scene burning itself into his memory. Amelia, his legacy, his entire world, sharing a moment of unguarded joy not with him, but with the help. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. He slid the glass door open. The sound, a loud whoosh of displaced air, cut through the laughter, silencing it instantly. Both heads whipped around. Amelia's face lit up for a split second. "Dad, you're home!" But her smile faltered when she saw his expression. Serafina's reaction was different. Her smile vanished, replaced by a calm, almost stoic neutrality. She immediately began to move towards the pool steps, her posture shifting from relaxed to respectful. "Mr. Croft, welcome back. We weren't expecting you for another hour." Arya ignored her. His eyes were locked on his daughter. "Amelia, get out of the pool, now!" His voice was quiet, but it carried the chilling weight of absolute command. It was the voice he used to dismantle competitors and silence dissent in the boardroom. Amelia visibly flinched. "What? Dad, what's wrong?" "I will not repeat myself. Get out of the pool and go to your room." Serafina had reached the steps, water sluicing from her simple one-piece swimsuit. "Mr. Croft, if I may—" "You may not," Arya snapped, finally turning his glacial gaze on her. He looked from her dripping form to the pool, then back to her face. His voice dripped with contempt. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Serafina stood her ground, wrapping a towel that lay on a nearby lounge chair around her shoulders. She met his gaze without flinching. Her voice was even, professional. "It's a hot day, sir. Amelia invited me to join her for a swim to cool off." "Amelia doesn't make the rules in this house. I do," Arya said, his voice rising. "Your job is to manage this household, Ms. Washington. It is not to fraternize with my daughter in my swimming pool. You are an employee. Have you forgotten that?" Amelia was out of the pool now, a towel clutched around her trembling body. "Dad, stop it! It was my idea. I asked her to swim with me. It was nothing." "It was not nothing, Amelia," Arya retorted, his anger now a palpable force in the hot afternoon air. "It is a complete and total breakdown of professional boundaries. It's inappropriate. It's unacceptable." He turned back to Serafina, who stood with a quiet dignity that only seemed to fuel his rage. He felt like he was losing control, not just of the situation, but of his entire world. The victory of the merger felt like a distant, hollow echo. "Pack your things," he said, the words falling like chips of ice. Amelia gasped. "What?" Serafina's calm expression finally broke, a flicker of shock and hurt crossing her features. "Sir?" "You heard me," Arya said, pointing a finger toward the main house. "You are fired. I want you off this property in 1 hour." "Dad, no!" Amelia cried, stepping between them. "You can't do this. She didn't do anything wrong. I made her. Please don't do this." Tears streamed down Amelia's face, but Arya was unmoved. In his mind, this was a cancer that needed to be cut out, a lapse in judgment so severe it bordered on betrayal. He had trusted this woman with the most precious thing in his life, and she had, in his eyes, abused that trust in the most intimate way possible. "Go to your room, Amelia," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "No, I won't let you do this to Sarah." Arya looked past his crying daughter to the woman at the center of the storm. Serafina's expression had changed again. The shock was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "It's all right, Amelia," Serafina said, her voice soft but firm. She looked directly at Arya, a challenge in her deep brown eyes. "Mr. Croft, perhaps you should ask your daughter why she felt the need to ask me to swim with her. Perhaps you should ask her what we were laughing about." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. The suggestion that there was more to this story, a layer he couldn't see, a truth he was too blind with anger to comprehend. But Arya Croft didn't deal in nuances and hidden meanings. He dealt in power and control. And in that moment, he had never felt more powerless. "1 hour, Ms. Washington," he said, his voice final. He turned his back on them both and strode back into the cold, silent house, leaving his weeping daughter and the wreckage of his homecoming behind him. He thought he had solved the problem, but he had just detonated the bomb. The hour that followed was the loudest silence Arya had ever experienced. The slam of Amelia's bedroom door reverberated through the mansion like a gunshot. He retreated to his study, a sanctuary of dark wood, leather, and the faint, comforting smell of old books. He poured himself a Macallan 25, the amber liquid doing little to soothe the inferno in his chest. He replayed the scene at the pool over and over, the laughter, the casual intimacy. It felt like a personal affront, a mockery of his role as a father. He'd been gone for a month fighting dragons in a concrete jungle for his daughter's future, only to return and find she had replaced him with the help. The thought was galling, humiliating. His phone buzzed. It was his COO, Jonathan Peters, likely calling with congratulations. Arya silenced it. He couldn't talk business. The foundations of his personal empire felt like they were cracking. A soft knock came at the study door. "Go away, Amelia," he growled. The door opened anyway. It was Serafina. She was dressed now in simple black slacks and a white blouse, her professional uniform. Her hair was still damp, and she held a small, worn, leather-bound book in her hands. She did not look like a woman who had just been fired. She looked like a queen in exile, her dignity a shield. "My hour is almost up, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice devoid of anger or pleading. It was a simple statement of fact. "Before I go, you need to see this." She stepped forward and placed the leather book on the polished surface of his desk. It was a journal. On the embossed cover were the initials, "I C. Isabella Croft." Arya stared at it as if it were a ghost. It was one of Isabella's old journals. He hadn't seen it in years. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice rough. "Amelia gave it to me," Serafina said. "She wanted me to understand her mother, to understand her." Arya's hand trembled as he reached for it. He opened it to a random page. Isabella's elegant script flowed across the paper, words he hadn't read since she was alive. October 12th, Arya is in Tokyo again. Amelia won her swim meet today. First place in the 50-meter freestyle. She looked for him in the stands. I saw the moment her face fell when she realized he wasn't there. I cheered loud enough for both of us, but I know it's not the same. This house is so big, but it feels so empty when it's just the two of us. Sometimes I think the pool is our only real friend. We swim, and for a little while we can pretend we're just a normal mother and daughter, not two lonely satellites orbiting a star that's always a million miles away. Arya's breath hitched. He flipped to another page. May 3rd, another missed birthday. He sent a Ferrari, a brand new Portofino for her 17th. She smiled and said thank you on the phone, but after she hung up, she came to me in the kitchen and asked if she could trade it for 1 day of his time. 1 full day. No phones, no emails, just him. I held her while she cried. What do you do with a gilded cage when all you want is the key? Page after page told the same story. A story of loneliness, of a daughter desperately craving the attention of a father who was physically and emotionally absent. A father who thought multi-billion-dollar mergers were a substitute for presence. "What we were laughing about, Mr. Croft," Serafina said softly, pulling him from the painful haze of the past, "was a story from this journal. A time when Isabella tried to teach Amelia how to do a cannonball and ended up flooding the patio. Amelia said, she said, swimming with me today was the first time she laughed like that in the pool since her mother died. The words struck Arya with the force of a physical blow. The Macallan glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The scene at the pool replayed in his mind, but this time it was cast in a completely different light. It wasn't a betrayal, it was a desperate attempt by his daughter to reclaim a piece of her lost childhood, a sliver of the maternal warmth that had been stolen from her. And Serafina hadn't been a usurper. She had been a conduit for that memory, a temporary solace. She's been grieving alone, Mr. Croft, Serafina continued, her voice still quiet but now carrying the weight of an indictment. You provide for her. You protect her from the world, but you don't see her. You see a legacy to be maintained, an heiress to be molded. I see a lonely girl who misses her mom. Shame, hot and suffocating, washed over Arya. He had been so blinded by his own rigid worldview, his obsession with propriety and control, that he had completely misinterpreted the one thing that mattered, his daughter's happiness. I didn't know, he stammered, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. That's the point, Serafina said, a hint of sadness in her voice. You never do. You're not here to know. She paused. My things are packed. A car is waiting for me. She turned to leave. In that moment, Arya saw not just a competent house manager, but a woman of profound wisdom and empathy. A woman who understood his daughter better than he did. Firing her was no longer about punishing an employee. It was about severing his daughter's last emotional lifeline. Wait, he said, his voice cracking. Serafina stopped, her back still to him. Don't go, he said. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. Please, stay. She turned slowly, her face unreadable. On what terms, Mr. Croft? As the maid who isn't allowed to get too close? Or as someone you might actually trust with your daughter's well-being? The question was a challenge, a test. He had to choose between his pride and his daughter, between the rigid order he had built his life on and the messy, complicated reality of family. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again, insistently this time. He glanced at the screen. It wasn't his COO. It was a name he hadn't seen in years. Gavin Thorne, a private investigator, a man known for his discretion and his ability to dig up any dirt on anyone. A cold dread settled over Arya. He hadn't called Gavin. He hadn't spoken to him in years, not since a messy corporate espionage case. Why was he calling now? He answered the phone, a sense of foreboding making his skin crawl. Gavin, what is it? Arya, Gavin's voice was slick, professional. Got a flag on one of your accounts. Thought you'd want to know immediately. It's a secondary household account. Looks like there have been a series of large, unusual cash withdrawals over the past 6 months, totaling just over $200,000. Arya's blood ran cold. The household account. Which account exactly? The one with signatory access given to your house manager, Gavin said. A Ms. Serafina Washington. Arya's eyes snapped up to meet Serafina's. She was still standing there, waiting for his answer. The journal lay on the desk between them, a testament to her supposed empathy. $200,000. The shame he had felt moments ago evaporated, instantly replaced by a fresh, volcanic surge of rage. This was worse than a simple lapse in judgment at the pool. This was calculated. This was theft. The journal, the stories, the empathy. Was it all an act? A long con to gain his trust, his daughter's trust, while she bled him dry? The intimate scene at the pool suddenly looked sinister again. Was she just softening the target? Keeping Amelia happy and distracted while she robbed the family blind? Mr. Croft, Serafina's voice cut through his silent accusations. Is everything all right? Arya lowered the phone, his face a granite mask. The plea to stay died in his throat. His momentary vulnerability curdled into suspicion and a chilling certainty. He had been played for a fool. Get out, he said, his voice flat and devoid of all emotion. Get out of my house, now. Serafina stared at him, bewildered by the sudden shift. The confusion on her face looked so genuine. But Gavin's information was cold, hard data, and Arya Croft trusted data more than he trusted people. And Miss Washington, he added as she slowly backed away, the hurt and confusion warring on her face. Don't think for a second this is over. I'll be contacting my lawyers. And the police. The confrontation left a toxic silence in its wake. Serafina left without another word, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the storm of accusations Arya had leveled at her. He heard the front door click shut, a sound of finality that offered no relief. Upstairs, Amelia had heard everything. The raised voices, the final, chilling threat of lawyers and police. She burst out of her room, her face pale and streaked with tears. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a rage that mirrored his own. "What did Gavin Thorne say?" Arya was taken aback. "How do you know that name?" "He works for you. You use him to dig up dirt on your business partners. On everyone. Did you have him investigate Sarah?" she cried, her voice escalating to a scream. "Did you?" "I didn't have to," Arya said coldly, trying to regain control. "He called me. There are financial irregularities. Money is missing, Amelia. A lot of it." "Money? You think this is about money?" Amelia laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "You have more money than God, and you're accusing the only person who has shown me a shred of genuine kindness in the last 4 years of stealing from you? Are you that blind? It's not about the amount, it's the principle." "The betrayal," he shot back, his own voice rising to match hers. "She was your confidant, your friend, and she was robbing us the entire time." "She wasn't robbing us!" Amelia screamed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I knew about the money. I told her to take it." Arya froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "You? What?" "It wasn't for her, you idiot." Amelia's voice cracked with anguish. She was breathing heavily, her whole body trembling. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to lash out with any weapon she could find. "It was for me. For the foundation." Arya stared at her blankly. "The foundation? What foundation?" Amelia's face crumpled, the anger giving way to a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow. "The one I started in Mom's name," she whispered, the words barely audible. "The Isabella Croft Foundation for Young Artists. For kids like her, Dad. Kids who had talent but no money. Kids who wanted to paint or sculpt or make music, but whose parents told them to be realistic. Like you." The final 2 words hit him harder than any physical blow ever could. "I tried to tell you," she continued, her voice gaining strength from the bitter truth. "Last year, I came to you with a whole proposal. I wanted to use some of my trust fund to get it started. Do you remember what you said?" Arya's mind was a blank. He'd had 100 meetings that year. 1,000. "You didn't even look up from your tablet," Amelia said, her eyes burning with the memory of the slight. "You said it was a noble but ultimately frivolous distraction. You said I needed to focus on my economics major at Stanford, on preparing to one day take a seat on the board. You said philanthropy was for old women with too much time on their hands." The memory surfaced, hazy but undeniable. He had said that. He'd seen it as a childish whim, a distraction from the serious business of managing an empire. Their empire. "So I did it myself," Amelia said, lifting her chin in defiance. "Secretly. Sarah helped me. She knows a lawyer who does pro bono work for nonprofits. She helped me set up the bank account, vet the applicants, everything. The money Gavin found? That was me awarding our first round of scholarships. That $200,000 sent 10 kids to art school. It bought canvases and clay and new violins. It wasn't stolen. It was invested. In something real. In something Mom would have loved." Every word was a nail in the coffin of Arya's certainty. The perfect, logical world he had constructed, where everything was either a business asset or a liability, shattered into a million pieces. The pool scene, the journal, the money. He had been wrong. Not just wrong, but catastrophically, heartbreakingly wrong. He had seen a thief where there was a co-conspirator in an act of secret kindness. He had seen a breach of propriety where there was a bond forged in the shared grief he himself had refused to acknowledge. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not a rebellious teenager, but a passionate, intelligent young woman who had inherited her mother's soul, not his ambition. A daughter he had systematically ignored, misunderstood, and alienated. Amelia, he began, but no words could possibly fill the chasm that had opened between them. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Her eyes were cold now, the tears gone. You didn't trust her, but worse than that, you didn't trust me. You didn't even consider that there might be a version of this story where you were the bad guy. She walked past him, grabbing her car keys from a bowl by the door. Where are you going? He asked, panic creeping into his voice. I'm going to find Sarah, she said, pulling open the front door. I'm going to apologize for what my father did. And then I'm going to figure out where I'm going to live. Because I can't stay here. Not anymore. The door slammed shut, echoing the one she'd slammed an hour before. But this one felt more permanent. This one felt like goodbye. Arya stood alone in the cavernous foyer, the silence pressing in on him. He had won the biggest deal of his career, but he had just lost everything that truly mattered. His assumptions, his pride, and his anger had cost him his daughter. His phone buzzed again. It was Gavin Thorne. He answered, his voice a hollow rasp. What? Just wanted to follow up, Gavin said, his voice still smooth, but with an undertone Arya couldn't quite place. Funny thing, I was running a cross-check on those wire transfers, and the receiving accounts for those scholarships, they trace back to shell corporations. All of them. And guess who the primary shareholder is for those corporations? Arya felt a new kind of dread, a sickening lurch in his stomach. Who? There was a pause, a beat of perfect dramatic timing. Alistair Finch. Alistair Finch, his chief rival, the man he had just humiliated in the Sterling-Kairos merger, the man who had vowed to ruin him. Arya's world, which had just been turned upside down, was now sent into a terrifying, uncontrollable spin. The foundation, the scholarships, the shell corporations, it was a setup, a trap. But who was the architect? Was Amelia an unwitting pawn in a far more dangerous game? Or was Serafina, the woman he had just fired and threatened, not the kind accomplice his daughter believed her to be, but a willing instrument in his enemy's revenge? He had no idea who to trust. His daughter was gone. His most trusted confidant might be a corporate spy, and his greatest enemy was somehow tangled up in his family's most intimate secrets. The shock at the pool had been nothing. This was the real nightmare. The name Alistair Finch hung in the air like poison gas. Arya's mind, trained to see patterns and strategies, started racing, connecting disparate points of data with terrifying speed. Finch was ruthless, a corporate predator who believed in total annihilation of the competition. The timing was too perfect. Arya wins the merger, a scandal brews in his own home. It was a classic Finch move. Attack not the fortress, but the foundation it's built on. But how? How could Finch possibly orchestrate something so personal? The answer was immediate and sickening. Gavin Thorne. Gavin, Arya said, his voice dangerously calm, who are you really working for? There was a short, sharp laugh on the other end of the line. It was no longer the slick professional sound of a PI. It was the smug chuckle of a victor. I'm a freelancer, Arya. I work for the highest bidder. And after the beating you gave him in Singapore, Alistair was feeling particularly generous. The pieces slammed into place. Gavin hadn't flagged an irregularity. He had created it. He had been feeding information to Finch for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He knew about Amelia, about Serafina, about the quiet, simmering dysfunction in the Croft household. He had been watching them all. The money, Arya began. Oh, the money is real, Gavin said, savoring the moment. Your daughter, bless her altruistic heart, really did create a foundation. And Serafina, loyal as a golden retriever, really did help her. They made it so easy. All we had to do was get ahead of her transfers. Finch's people set up dummy corporations with names almost identical to the real art schools. A few rerouted wire instructions, a little digital sleight of hand, and your daughter's noble gesture becomes a direct pipeline of funds to your biggest rival. Arya felt nauseous. Amelia hadn't just been manipulated. Her beautiful tribute to her mother had been weaponized against him. And the best part, Arya? Gavin continued, his voice dripping with malice. The story, it writes itself. Grieving billionaire's daughter, under the influence of scheming housekeeper, embezzles hundreds of thousands from family estate. We've already leaked it to a few select friends at the Post and the Wall Street Journal. They're holding it for now, waiting for the cherry on top. What cherry on top? Arya gritted out, his knuckles white around his phone. A formal accusation, an arrest. Once you file that police report against Miss Washington, as you so helpfully threatened to do, the story becomes undeniable. Your company's stock will tank on the character clause alone. The board will panic. Your victory in the merger will turn to ash in your mouth. Alistair will be there to pick up the pieces. Checkmate. The line went dead. Arya stood paralyzed. He had been so utterly and completely played. His pride, his quick temper, his suspicion. Finch and Gavin had predicted his every move. They baited the trap with the scene at the pool, knowing it would trigger his possessiveness and anger. They laid the financial evidence, knowing he would jump to the most cynical conclusion. They had used his own worst instincts as their primary weapon. He had to find Amelia. He had to find Serafina. He had to stop this before it spiraled completely out of control. He called Amelia's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He tracked her car using the onboard GPS. It was parked outside a modest, well-kept bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Culver City. He knew with a sinking certainty that it must be Serafina's house. He drove like a madman, breaking every speed limit, the sleek Maybach a blur of chrome and desperation. When he arrived, he saw Amelia's convertible parked by the curb. He ran to the door and pounded on it, his previous anger replaced by raw, undiluted fear. The door was opened by a tall young man, about Amelia's age, with Serafina's kind eyes and a wary expression. "Can I help you?" "I need to see my daughter. I need to see Serafina," Arya said, his voice ragged. The young man, presumably Serafina's son, stood his ground. "I don't think that's a good idea right now." From behind him, Serafina's calm voice emerged. "It's all right, Daniel. Let him in." Arya stepped inside. The house was the polar opposite of his own. It was small but filled with warmth, books, and the smell of fresh coffee. Photos of family crowded every surface. It was a home. Amelia was sitting at a small kitchen table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. She looked at him, her eyes red but no longer angry. They just looked tired. Serafina stood beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder. "They played us," Arya said, foregoing any preamble. "All of us." He quickly, concisely explained the phone call with Gavin Thorne. He laid out Finch's entire scheme. The setup, the rerouted funds, the impending media scandal. As he spoke, he watched their faces. Amelia's expression shifted from exhaustion to horror. Serafina's calm demeanor remained, but her eyes sharpened with intelligent focus. She had been processing, analyzing. When he finished, the room was silent. "The police report," Serafina said finally, her voice steady. "He's waiting for you to file it. That's the trigger." "I'm not going to file it," Arya said immediately. "It might not matter," Serafina countered, her strategic mind clearly clicking into gear. "He has the bank records. He has the story. A leak is a leak. Once it's out there, the truth won't be able to catch up to the lie. Your reputation will be damaged regardless." She was right. In the court of public opinion, a denial was never as loud as an accusation. "So what do we do?" Amelia asked, her voice small. She looked at Arya, then at Serafina. She was looking for a plan, for reassurance. For the first time in his life, Arya Croft, the master strategist, had no idea what to do. He had been outmaneuvered. His usual tactics, leveraging power, money, and intimidation, were useless here. Using them would only feed the narrative Finch had so carefully crafted. It was Serafina who spoke, her voice cutting through the panic. "We don't react," she said, looking at Arya. "We act. We don't deny their story. We tell our own. First." "How?" Arya asked, humbled. He was no longer the billionaire employer giving orders. He was a man asking for help. "Your daughter," Serafina said, squeezing Amelia's shoulder gently. "She is our greatest weapon, the foundation, the real one. We get ahead of the story. We don't let them frame this as a scandal. We frame it as what it is, a tribute, a legacy of love." She looked at Arya, her gaze direct and unflinching. You have a press conference scheduled for tomorrow morning to celebrate the merger, don't you? Arya nodded. 9 a.m. Every major financial news outlet will be there. Good, Serafina said, a flicker of a smile on her lips. Then Alistair Finch has just given us the perfect stage to announce the official launch of the Isabella Croft Foundation. A plan began to form, not born of corporate warfare, but of something else entirely. It was a plan built on the truth Amelia had tried to hide, the empathy Arya had scorned, and the quiet strength of the woman he had so wrongly accused. The three of them, an alliance forged in crisis, stood together in the small warm kitchen. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, they were all on the same side. The next morning, the press room at Croft Enterprises Tower was electric. The air buzzed with the chatter of journalists and the flash of cameras. They were there to hear Arya Croft, the conquering hero of capitalism, deliver a victory speech about the Sterling Kairos merger. They were expecting jargon about synergy, shareholder value, and market dominance. They were about to get something entirely different. Arya stood just off stage, straightening his tie. His hands, for the first time before a major public appearance, were clammy. He wasn't afraid of the crowd or the questions. He was afraid of failing the two women who stood beside him. Amelia was dressed in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. She looked poised, but Arya could see the nervous energy thrumming beneath the surface. Serafina stood next to her, not in her house manager's uniform, but in a sharp professional gray suit. She wasn't there as staff. She was there as an advisor, a pillar of strength. Her son Daniel was in the front row, holding a camera, his presence a quiet show of support. "You don't have to do this, Amelia," Arya whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I do," she said, meeting his eyes in the reflection of a nearby monitor. "For Mom, and for Sarah, and for the 10 kids whose scholarship money is currently sitting in Alistair Finch's slush fund." Serafina gave her a reassuring nod. "Speak from your heart. The truth is your shield." Jonathan Peters, his COO, rushed over. "Arya, 5 minutes. The market's waiting. What's the big announcement? You've been cryptic all morning." He glanced suspiciously at Amelia and Serafina. "What are they doing here?" "They're my board members," Arya said, the words feeling right as soon as he said them. "And they're about to help me announce the most important venture of my life." He walked onto the stage, Amelia and Serafina following a step behind him. A wave of applause and camera flashes washed over them. Arya stepped to the podium, but instead of launching into his prepared remarks about the merger, he set his note cards aside. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and strong. "Thank you all for coming. We're here today to talk about value, legacy, and the future, but not in the way you might expect." He paused, letting the room settle. "For years, I have defined legacy by stock prices and market caps. I believed I was building an empire for my daughter. I have come to realize in a very painful and humbling way that I was wrong. An empire of glass and steel is worthless if you lose the ones you built it for." A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the speech they were expecting. In a conference room across town, Arya knew Alistair Finch and Gavin Thorne were watching, likely smirking, waiting for the scandal to break. "My greatest partner was never a corporation. It was my late wife, Isabella," Arya continued, his voice catching slightly. "She knew that true legacy isn't about what you own. It's about what you give. A lesson my daughter Amelia never forgot." He turned and gestured to Amelia, who stepped forward to the podium. She took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. "My mother believed that art was the language of the soul," Amelia began, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger with every word. "She believed that every young person with a gift deserved the chance to share it. For the past year in her memory, I have been secretly working to create a foundation to support these young artists. It is called the Isabella Croft Foundation." She then told the whole story, the secret project, the joy of selecting the first candidates, her desire to create something meaningful. She didn't mention the betrayal or the stolen money. Not yet. She just told the pure, unvarnished truth of her mission. Arya watched, his heart swelling with a pride so profound it almost brought him to his knees. This was his daughter, this passionate, eloquent, brave young woman. Then Serafina stepped forward. A journalist in the front row whispered, "Who is that?" My name is Serafina Washington, she said calmly. For the past 2 years, I have had the privilege of serving as the Croft household manager, but I am also the mother of a scholarship student, a board member of my community center, and I was the first person Amelia trusted with the dream of this foundation. I helped her with the logistics, the planning, and the administration, because I too believe that an investment in a child's passion is the greatest investment one can make. She laid out the framework of the foundation with crisp, professional clarity. She spoke of its mission, its structure, and its goals. She was no longer the maid from the pool. She was a competent, formidable executive. Finally, Arya stepped back to the podium. The Isabella Croft Foundation is no longer a secret project. As of today, I am pledging an initial endowment of $100 million to its mission. The room gasped. Furthermore, Arya said, his eyes finding the main camera, we have become aware that the foundation's initial grants were illegally intercepted. The $200,000 intended for our first 10 scholarship recipients was rerouted by a third party through a series of shell corporations owned by the CEO of Finch Industries, Alistair Finch. Chaos erupted in the room. Shouts, questions, cameras flashing wildly. We have already turned over the evidence of this wire fraud to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Arya continued over the din, but we will not let the criminal actions of a corporate rival derail our mission. Croft Enterprises will be personally covering the full scholarships for all 10 students, effective immediately. Their dreams will not be deferred by another man's greed. He had taken Finch's sordid little story and blasted it with the light. He hadn't just denied the scandal. He had transformed it into a story of philanthropy, resilience, and a public declaration of war against his enemy, fought on his own terms. He looked at Amelia, who was beaming, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. He looked at Serafina, who gave him a small, respectful nod, her eyes shining with pride. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Alistair Finch was ruined. The scandal he had engineered backfired spectacularly, painting him as a petty, cruel fraudster. Gavin Thorne was arrested. The stock of Finch Industries plummeted, while Croft Enterprises, praised for its integrity and philanthropic pivot, soared. But none of that was the real victory. A few weeks later, Arya stood by the pool. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. He was in shorts and a polo shirt, a book resting unread in his lap. Amelia was in the pool, teaching Daniel, Serafina's son, the proper form for a racing dive. Their laughter echoed in the afternoon air. Serafina, now the official executive director of the Isabella Croft Foundation, with a corner office and a salary to match, sat in the lounge chair beside him, reviewing grant applications on a tablet. She's happy, Arya said quietly, watching his daughter. I haven't seen her this happy in years. She has her father back, Serafina replied, not looking up from her tablet. That's all she ever wanted. Arya looked at the shimmering water, the memory of that fateful afternoon still vivid. The anger, the pride, the terrible misunderstanding. It had taken nearly losing everything for him to finally see what was right in front of him all along. His family wasn't just a daughter to protect. It was a bond to be nurtured. And sometimes the people who come into your life as employees can become the architects of your salvation. He stood up, shedding his shirt. Hey, Amelia, cannonball contest? Amelia's face lit up with a brilliant smile. You're on, old man. As Arya Croft ran and jumped, sending a massive, joyful splash across the patio. He knew he had finally come home. The gilded cage was gone, replaced by a foundation of love, trust, and second chances. The story of Arya, Amelia, and Serafina reminds us that our first assumptions are often our greatest blind spots. What Arya saw as a betrayal was actually a bond, and the crisis that threatened to tear them apart ultimately became the glue that redefined their family. It's a powerful lesson in looking past labels, titles, and our own pride to see the truth of the human heart. Their journey from a shocking discovery at the pool to a united front against a common enemy shows that the strongest foundations aren't built with money, but with trust, forgiveness, and the courage to admit when we are wrong. If this story of unexpected twists and emotional redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a story that's more than what it seems on the surface. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that explore the complexities of family and finance. What did you think of Arya's initial reaction? Let us know in the comments below.